Welcome to Guys Night Gaming, where we paint miniatures and we put them into Golden Demon. So 2025 was my first year actually going to Adepticon. I decided to enter in a mini for Golden Demon. It was just kind of a personal goal, didn't have to win or anything like that. But I also made a video about what I thought about it. You can find that there, and the loot that I brought home, if you want to check that out. But if you find this video interesting or the other two videos interesting at all and you want to help a small channel grow, please feel free to subscribe below, then hit the little bell notification, and then like and share the video, and then maybe leave a comment. I think that's supposed to help too. But let's go ahead and get on to my process. 2025 was my first time attending Adepticon, and I wanted to try Golden Demon. I also wanted to keep it within the realm of my army, so I tried to put together this icon bearer for my Plague Marines. So the first thing I wanted to do was kind of set my expectations in the right place and my goals for this whole thing. What I decided was that my goal was to just get it in and finished. I just wanted to see if I could get myself to do it. My plan was to enter in the single miniature Warhammer 40k category. I didn't want to make the project too big. I thought that for my first time entering, it would probably be a bad idea to stretch myself too far. I think in the end that aligned with the goals that I'd set with myself, and I decided to go ahead and get started on my project. One of the first things, of course, with any mini is cleaning up the mold lines after getting him off the sprue, and that's what I did. I used the foam sticks, I used my X-Acto knife, and I don't think I've cleaned the mold lines off a miniature as much as I did on this one. So I think the next problem I had to go through is actually how I was going to paint this thing. I know sometimes when you are doing Warhammer minis, you can get minis where it's hard to reach certain places, so I decided to go ahead with sub-assemblies. And usually when I do that, I have these little wooden dowels with some clothespins hanging out of them, or not clothespins, safety pins hanging out of them that I've cut to size. Then I can just glue the separate pieces to them. This will allow me to have the pieces separated to be able to get in the behind tight spots. And for priming, it'll let me make sure that I get every piece of surface area. When I moved on to priming, I knew I wanted it purple. That's my main color. So I based my army off of the Black Plague. And I read that the Black Plague under a microscope is purple. So that's what I went with. And my favorite color is purple. But I wanted to start dark and go light. So I started with a Rust-Oleum black primer. And then I used a Liquitex purple spray can. A problem I ended up running into almost right away was the purple spray can. Never used this kind of paint before, but after using it, I realized that it was more of a translucent paint. So essentially what that did was a translucent dark purple over black. Looks almost like nothing. I ended up priming it several times, as little as I could with the purple, and that eventually almost took all the crispness of the model away. This mistake number one. After getting them all set up on my little tiny plinths, I primed them up and got them ready for base coats. So I'm using Duncan Rhodes 2 thin coats paints here. I went with Von Evil purple, Incubus purple, and Decadent purple for my 3 colors. To lay down my base coats, I decided to use some sponging for the first main color, the darkest purple. And the reason I like to use this is because I like the way that it kind of blends in with the dark shadow colors towards the edges, and sometimes it can give you texture on your paint job. And what I'll typically do is I have a big sponge paintbrush. I'll rip a chunk off just so it's never the same. And I'll put it in my tweezers here and then put some tape around the tweezers so I don't have a cramped hand after a while. And I'll use that to stipple on to my pieces. Now, when you're painting something like this, you want to determine what direction the light is coming from with the bottle. So I figured that out, where I wanted it to come from, and that's kind of the angle that I took with applying these lighter coats of base colors. After that, I moved on to my midtone and my highlight color. And for these, I switched to a brush. The brush I used in particular was a size 0, but I think all brushes are different. So your size 0 might not be the same as my size 0. When I switched over to a brush, I decided to go with some stippling to help blend in the colors and the edges. And I also used a little bit of wet blending. Finally got my base layers down. You can see here, close up, that a lot of the detail has been basically drowned out from that spray, this rattle can spray. A lot of the rivets, a lot of the small creases in the shoulder pads, especially the gun here. You can see that it's just pretty much gone. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the base coats I was able to get on there, but I definitely would take some different approaches next time. My next step was to get ready for the metallics, and I also put some white layers on the icky gross tube flesh that comes with this mini, just so I could lay brighter, less opaque colors on top. For the metallics, I wanted to go with a bronzy color with little hints of silver throughout. So my main color would be the bronze. That's pretty much all the edging on the armor, and then the tubes, a few small pieces here and there, and like the chains and stuff would be silver. I ended up severely underestimating the time it would take to get this completed to the level I wanted it to be. So I had to, unfortunately, do a lot of the small detail work in a different location than my filming location. So I didn't get a lot of that on camera. And my decision to go with the rattle cans, or my poor execution of the rattle cans, however you want to look at it, actually came back to bite me in the butt again. So what ended up happening, since I had so many layers of paint on those rattle can layers, the connection points on the mini were very poor. It left huge gaps, especially up in the left shoulder pad. So I had to go in with my X-Acto knife and shave away the paint and get it to fit as best I could. That actually resulted in a little better of a connection, but I had to fill that gap with green stuff. I think I actually used Milliput. So I filled that in and had to repaint the shoulder pad, essentially. At this point, the mini is pretty much together, and I really, really enjoy the look of it. It looks really nice. It may be the fact that I don't see a whole lot of my minis that get to a completion point quite like this, but I'm excited to put it on the base nonetheless and get that going. So for the base on this guy and my army as a whole, essentially my army is a Death Guard army on a desert planet that has just been kind of withering away, weather worn from sandstorms, so very Marsy orange and dusty. That's kind of what I wanted to go for. What did I end up using for my base was the AK Interactive AK War Game Terrain Sunrise Blaze diorama paste. It's a super thick orange, very texturalized paste. And I ended up putting that on top of some Elmer's glue to create the poor man's version of Cracked Earth. And it worked okay. It wasn't too bad. Within the mix, the Sunrise Blaze mix, I actually put some red paint or red-brown paint to give it a little darker of a color. I didn't want it to be too striking on the base. After that was all dried up, I did a little bit of dry brushing onto it, and that kind of completed that step. I put a couple little tufts on there, and then I went for my weathering powder from Huge Miniatures. I used orange dust on this miniature, and I applied it liberally on the bottom, wiped away where I didn't want it to be with a brush, and I used sort of I would say dry brush type of brush for this. Then to apply that, I used some alcohol, isopropyl alcohol. I just spritzed it on there. I let that dry and then reevaluated. I wanted it a little more coated in it, so I did a couple more layers on the bottom there. I'll say at this point I am one night away from heading out to Adepticon, so I was in crunch time. There were a few more things I wanted to do. I wanted to do some weathering on the armor, like sandblast type effects, but unfortunately I didn't get to that. But here's the final piece that I turned in for Golden Demon 2025. Let me know what you think in the comments below about my mini, my entry. I know some mistakes were made, but I'm pretty happy with the result. I do have plans for next year already. I'm going to try a little bit harder this time. But if you are here this long, maybe go down and subscribe, hit the bell notification, like the video, share it if you think other people would like it too. And I hope that you learned something today. And if not, I hope that you play something soon.